Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Lanier, and I'm president of Coaching Ourselves, and I want to thank you very much for joining this Fireside Chat. Today, we're proud to be able to bring you this Fireside Chat with Rachel Hutchinson, Charles Jennings, and Vivian Heijne. This Fireside Chat will last approximately 45 minutes, followed by Q&A. Following this Fireside Chat, everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording. I encourage you to share with your colleagues who couldn't join us today. Coaching Ourselves is bringing you this Fireside Chat today. We at Coaching Ourselves, we offer organizations leadership development programs through small group discussions. Each of our 90 discussion guides spark meaningful discussion, honest human communication, connections, where managers share experiences and learn from each other. During this period of COVID-19, as well as offering these free Fireside Chats to our community, we're offering an opportunity for all learning and development, HR, OD professionals to try a free Coaching Ourselves session online over Zoom. It's a unique experience. We usually get 20 to 30 L&D professionals, HR professionals from around the world, and we spend about 90 minutes in small groups talking about issues and challenges of common interest to all of us. And today, many of these issues revolve around virtual teams and working and helping others virtually. So, on to our chat. Our host today is Charles Jennings. Charles is co-founder of the 70-20-10 Institute, and he specializes in the change processes required to extend learning into the workflow to improve individual, team, and organizational performance. Charles has been working with 70-20-10 and similar performance-based approaches for more than 20 years. His background includes roles as Chief Learning Officer for Reuters and Thomson Reuters, and as a business school professor. I ask you all to please enjoy this Fireside Chat, and I will now bring Charles, Vivian, and Rachel on. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you very much, Phil, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. So I'd just like to start by introducing my fellow chatters to you, Rachel Hutchinson and Vivian Heijnen. Rachel, first of all, leads the learning and development team at Hilti. Many of you will know Hilti as the multinational construction and energy manufacturing company. Hilti provides the global construction industry with the tools it needs to operate. And I'm sure the red Hilti logo is probably one of the most recognizable, iconic logos in the world. And also many of us probably have Hilti consumer tools in our garages and our workshops. Now, Rachel works and manages her global team from the Colorado mountains. She's been with Hilti for 15 years and is a natural problem solver. Her early career, she held roles in project management and technical communication. She also has an MBA, so she's got the perfect blend of aptitude and diverse experience to lead change in an organization. Now, Vivian co-founded the 70-20-10 Institute with Jos Ararts and me back in 2015. And Vivian spent her career working in the areas of performance and learning, initially with the Royal Dutch Forces, then across a number of industries, particularly and appropriately at this time in healthcare. And Vivian has been the driving force at the Institute implementing the 70-20-10 methodology with clients across the world. And she's worked closely with Rachel and her team at Hilti. Now, just to clarify, the 70-20-10 methodology is a performance-based approach and a set of tools that are focused on helping L&D teams deliver real value for their organizations. And the methodology is based around the 70-20-10 framework, which aims to support all the learning that takes place in the daily flow of work. And Vivian, over the past few weeks, has been working on projects with large hospitals and healthcare providers to help with their urgent needs and move people into new roles and to carry out tasks that are new to them. So she'll talk about how that's gone and how the 70-20-10 approach has helped. But I'd like to turn to Rachel first and ask you some questions, Rachel. So it's great to have you here. And I guess the first question we always ask in these times is, how are things and how have things been and with you and change in your working life over the last few weeks?
Thank you, Charles. Yes, it's definitely been an adjustment for me. I'm typically on the road, and I am now working full-time from the top of a mountain in Colorado, and working more than ever because learning and development is definitely in high demand right now, to either reskill for new skills that are needed or to modify things that we had intended to deliver in a more face-to-face environment. It's a big shift.
Yes, exactly. And what about how things change more widely in the working lives of your Hilti colleagues?
I think that's been the bigger change for us is, I was used to working remotely, but many of our employees were not used to working from home, and they have struggled with a lot of things. They've struggled with balancing childcare. They've struggled with balancing their mental health. Obviously, everybody's worried about what's going on in the world these days. They've also struggled because, of course, a big portion of our workforce is a direct customer-facing sales force who obviously cannot be visiting customers at this time, and that adds an additional amount of stress. And I would say, from a team member perspective, or a team leader perspective, I would say this has been being forced into remote work is completely different than when an organization chooses remote working and makes a change management plan to go toward that direction.
And thinking at the organizational level, are Hilti's priorities changing in the current crisis? And if so, how is Hilti management able to carry on, business in the current climate?
I think, the nice thing about Hilti is we call ourselves a caring and performance-oriented organization, and the caring side is definitely coming out. It is safety first for employees. It is definitely all about how do we ensure the health and well-being of our team members. And so I wouldn't say that the priorities have changed. I would say we've had to refocus on different things that have become more important in these kind of crazy times. I would say, we're always doing a lot of work. Our mission statement is creating a better future. And so that is something which right now, we're finding a lot of ways for people to volunteer remotely. If obviously we're spending a lot of time on learning and development opportunities. We are a privately held organization, and we definitely try never to do layoffs or similar types of things, and it takes extreme financial downturns for those types of things to occur within Hilti. Unfortunately, they have in the past and may affect some of our market organizations across the world. But with that being said, they're really focusing on trying to use this time right now to upskill, to reskill for people who were used to visiting customers on site. How can we improve their telephone sales skills? How can we ensure that people are able to work from home? So we're spending a lot of time on work from home type things. For our training teams, how do we deliver trainings remotely? In the past, obviously, we had a lot of on-demand digital resources, but we didn't typically do virtual classrooms. So most of our formal classroom-based training was delivered in a face-to-face environment, and obviously all of that is having to shift for our training teams. For our general managers, they're focusing a lot on what we're calling care and perform. So are you maintaining your well-being? As someone who chose to go to a virtual environment, I never even thought about the fact of how disconcerting this would be for people who weren't used to having to create boundaries between work and personal life. And the fact that you can quickly burn out if you are, rolling out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning and then finding yourself still working at 9 o'clock at night. You can't keep up that pace. So I think our general management staff is really focused on trying to ensure that people are setting appropriate boundaries realizing, of course, that we have a lot of targets to hit and a lot of goals to reach, but we still need to do that by putting our team members first.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of us are finding that that getting those boundaries, recognizing those boundaries, and then working to make sure that those boundaries are there. You know, the old work-life boundary, I guess it's sort of work and home, and making sure that those boundaries are in place is a challenge, I think, for many, many people. So that's really interesting to hear that. What I'd like to do is to get into the meat of this conversation, this chat between the three of us, and start to think about and explore some of the work that you and your team have done with Vivian and her colleagues on employing the 70-20-10 methodology within Hilti. Can you tell us a little bit, talk us through a little bit about the drivers that led you and Hilti to use the methodology, to start working with the methodology? What was it that really drove you towards that?
Of course. So when we first started working with Vivian, which was several years ago now, you know, we outlined our learning strategy, and our learning strategy was to stop teaching and start learning. And we wanted to really, based on the feedback from more than 4,000 of our team members worldwide, we realized that we had been taking a more academic approach to learning and development. We had been retaining control of what they needed to learn. We had been assigning them, and Vivian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were at like 90% or better of our content was formal learning plans and classroom-based learning. And that was absolutely not working for our very young population. That was something which they had said, you know, hey, come on, this isn't how we learn at home. It's not how we want to learn at work, and you're teaching us the wrong things at the wrong times. And so we sat down with, primarily with Vivian, but obviously we also had others involved as well. And we started looking at how could we make a major shift from a completely formal approach into something that met the needs of the team members and helped them perform in their role immediately, similar to how they were used to learning in their daily life. And that's where Vivian and team kind of, they came in. We ran some programs initially, so that we had 25 or so people, I think, who were responsible for creating materials, not L&D people necessarily. We did have about half of those were L&D people and half of those were people from other areas of the business. And we wanted to make the change in mindset happen across the company, so that it wasn't just an L&D change, but really a change in the way we develop our team members worldwide. And that's where I think, you know, in the programs, Vivian and Joss had us really creating actual business needs. So we would take an actual business need that we had, and we would develop a 70-20-10 solution from that. And obviously that means that, you know, 70% of that is not happening in a formal physical classroom basis. And that was a huge mindset change for us to see it. But the really cool thing was that it meant we had immediate successes. So we saw the benefit almost immediately, because some of these were small things that were done inside one country or inside one department. Some of them were things which crossed the whole globe, but they were all very finite projects that allowed the organization to see that by shifting from a teaching methodology to a learning methodology, we were actually rapidly increasing the business results. We were increasing sales. We were increasing engagement of employees. We were increasing engagement of customers. One of the projects which was so fascinating was where the project itself was, how do we convert our service quotes? So when we go out and say that we want to sign a specific service that Hilti offers, how do we increase those And we even set it at a relatively low number. I think we set it at trying to get to 25% of the quotes were converted to business. And it's, you know, I actually just checked the numbers a couple of days ago, and we're at like 70% now are converted. So it was fascinating because even in the first minutes, we jumped and you know, I'd have to go back and check the exact numbers, but I think within 3 months we were at something like 40% of the conversion rate from quote into sale on that specific service. So it was really fascinating.
And Rachel, when we all talked a week or so ago, you were mentioning that things had differed across different parts of the company, particularly with this current situation, and different countries and regions. And you were suggesting that was reflecting in terms of how the methodology, how 70-20-10 have been embedded. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
That's been a huge eye-opener, I think, for us, for those areas where they had embraced the 70-20-10 methodology. The shift has been almost unnoticeable. It's simply a matter of potentially moving a small amount of classroom-based content into virtual classrooms. For those areas where they had, and it's funny because we used to laugh that you could tell which areas they were because they would refer to it as the 10, 20, and 70 model instead of the 70-20-10 model, because they still had to have that formal piece really up front and center. For those areas where they had not yet embraced the fact that on demand is really effective for adult learners. I mean, adult learners know they want to do a good job. They may not know what they don't know, but they know how to go look for things they don't know as soon as they figure out they can't accomplish something. And that's the benefit of designing solutions in a 70-20-10 methodology, is that you are putting the power to perform, which I think every single person wants to do. You're putting that power in the hands of the individual. And for those countries or those departments who were already working that way, they haven't had a lot of challenges. For those areas where they had not yet moved in that direction, we are seeing significant challenges. We're seeing a huge amount more stress. We're seeing reports that they are unable to complete learning transfer. So that means they're not actually seeing the result of what they have attempted to transfer over onto the job site. And I will say there's a few that have been a little, you know, I was going through some materials for our care and perform information this past week, and it had in it a lot of quotes from team members. And I was quite pleased by the fact that, you know, you could really see people making the mindset shift. And unfortunately, they've had to do it all in the last month. But we are now kind of seeing the turn where people are at the point of saying, okay, this is actually working. People can learn this way. I'm learning this way. I'm able to change. I'm able to perform. But unfortunately, some of those organizations, you know, it was a little slower for their team members because of the fact that it was unfamiliar. So it was additional changes.
Sure. Thank you. And Vivian, can I turn to you? You worked closely with Rachel and her team, and were there key factors that were really important in the work you did together? What would you identify as the key important factors, and maybe the challenges that you faced together?
Yeah, I think that Rachel already mentioned a few of them. One of the key factors was that in the beginning, Rachel and some others of the global team set a really clear strategy and had a strong vision on we have to go that direction if it comes to learning. So if we are not going to connect to the business, then we will have an issue maybe not on a very short term, but really on the mid term. So, but this vision is really key, because you get struggles and challenges on the road, you know, or on the journey. And I think definitely there were some challenges during the journey. But if you have a very strong idea on, okay, maybe we don't know what's the end of the journey, but we know that we have to go that direction, that makes it very strong. And also to involve other people in teams. And it was really, what was really good was, indeed, there was kind of quite a lot of people already, like 25 or 30 indeed, both on management level and on L&D people, but also people from Lean, for instance. So the multi-disciplinary approach worked very successful, combined with that, okay, we go that direction and we really want to achieve some results. And so that was the first one. And the second one is the piece of the business alignment. So really going to the business and see what are your concerns, what is going not very well at this moment, like for instance these quotes and sales, but also some things on other areas, on product management, and you can actually just apply it to everything. And but that business alignment and also talking to that business led to very interesting insights also, where normally people from L&D didn't even thought about that, I think. So that's also the core of the methodology, the alignment with the business. So you start actually the other way around. So instead of thinking, okay, what kind of solutions, or what kind of 70-20-10 solutions we should offer, we are going to think back the other way around and think, okay, what do they really need in business to be able to achieve the results? What critical tasks do people need to execute to be able to do that results? And then think, okay, how can we support that task? But also, and that's also something that's really key, I think, is looking at influencing factors in the environment of all these people. So for instance, in one of these projects, there was this example of onboarding salespeople, and that took some time. And they started to talk to the people in the business, and then it seems that the materials that they have in their vans to demonstrate at clients were not, I mean, very accurate or actual, or sometimes didn't work very well. So that kind of things also, we took that also into consideration. So it's actually both. So it's looking at what do people need in the workplace to be able to execute their critical tasks, but also what do they really need in terms of environmental conditional factors that we need to solve. And traditionally, L&D thinks, well, that's not my cup of tea, for instance. So that was really good that there were also some people from other disciplinaries in the whole program and the first few years involved, because you could also solve those problems together with the business. And that's another critical factor, I think.
Sure, thanks very much. And Rachel, did you see that from your perspective, that expanded level of interaction and that cross-functional work for the people? I'm particularly thinking from the L&D people who are involved there. Did you see an expanded horizon for them, or them working more closely with the internal clients?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, it's one of those pieces where having, I would say that's part of our success, was having the cross-functional representation in those original workshops and seeing the quick wins, the results. You know, I mean, Vivian mentioned that onboarding, which was unbelievable. We went from where it was taking something like 15 to 18 months to repay hiring costs and salary, down to 5 months for salespeople that were onboarded. And you know, that one we had to look at over a little bit longer term, but she also mentioned our product managers. The product manager onboarding, it's a 2-year role. So obviously you have to come up to speed very, very fast. And so for them to see the success almost immediately of new people coming in, well, then word gets around. I mean, we're 30,000 people, but we still have in many ways kind of a small company ability to network and share all of our information, et cetera. And I think that made a tremendous difference, was really focusing on that cross-functional piece. And I realized that's maybe challenging for some organizations where L&D might not be as connected. But I would argue that if you're not connected to your business leaders, if you're not connected to all of these teams, whether those are your design teams or your marketing teams or your sales leadership, your general managers, your finance heads, your lean department, your business excellence or process excellence teams, there's so much overlap, especially with those last two, business excellence or process excellence and L&D. That you really need to be connecting to the leadership teams in those areas and ensuring that you are taking an approach and a methodology that will work for the entire organization. And to me, I mean, you know that I'm business oriented, I'm profit oriented, but that's the value to me of the 70-20-10 methodology, is it focuses on the business need. It doesn't focus on what do I want to teach somebody. It doesn't even focus on what does somebody need to learn. It focuses on what do we need to accomplish in the business. And now, okay, to accomplish that, what do we have to do? Okay, now, how do we do those tasks? And I think that to me is probably the value add.
Great, thanks very much. I think that summed it up perfectly, the methodology, and it's all around, you know, in working with the methodology, we talk about critical tasks, about identifying critical tasks, not necessarily about behaviors. It's really about how do you achieve those critical tasks. First of all, identify them and achieve them. That's great, thank you. Vivian, can I turn to you? You've been working with healthcare organizations over the past few weeks, or well, you've been working with them for years, but I know you've been working specifically with them over the last few weeks since coronavirus arrived in Europe. And what is it about the 70-20-10 methodology that's making it useful in situations like that right now?
Well, first of all, you don't have to think what and how you should start. I think so. That means methodology gives you some backbone or structure where you can work along, and it doesn't matter if it's in this situation or in a normal situation. So what we did is, if you take a look at the methodology, well, basically there are 4 major steps. It's like you first identify, as Rachel just mentioned, the business needs, but also the performance needs. And then you're going to take a look at what critical tasks do people need to execute to achieve this performance. So for instance, if you need to be sure that a lot of new people are onboarding very fast in healthcare, even if they don't have so much experience, then your business outcome or your business need is, we need to, let's say, have 50 or 100 new people onboarded within 2 weeks in the organization. And then you start looking at what critical tasks, and you really have to be sure that you have the most critical tasks, because you can't teach them everything. So then, so we are not going to look at competency. So because also on the speed of this business, it's much more easy to take a look at the tasks instead of the competencies, because these tasks, these are steady. I mean, yes, the disease is different, but still you have to take care of those people, especially, for instance, in elderly care. And then from there, you design what we call the 100. So, which means we first go take a look at the workplace and say, okay, what would really be helpful for them when they onboard various speed. So, for instance, a performance support or task support, which is really short. And I know that Hilti also implemented this, but you can just also create that on quite fast. And you can distribute it, for instance, online, but you can even do it offline. And that is also your starting point for, if needed, your formal learning piece. Because especially in healthcare, of course, sometimes you also want to have the possibility to practice a little bit before you go into onto the workplace. But you do that with this task support immediately, so that you know that you have something that you can use also in the workplace. It feels safe. It's also a way of making sure that the standards are clear and followed on the workplace, and that really works very well here. You can do the same in this situation. It's just that you have to speed up a little bit, but you don't have to think about your steps. You just take the same steps on a higher speed, and sometimes that's even more easy, actually, because it doesn't take too much time to gather some people you need. Everybody has time for that, and you can even do this online. So what we did is, in a lot of situations, we created 1 or 2 weeks quite interesting supporting system, because it's really a systems level in these healthcare organizations.
Thanks very much, Vivian. Just one more question before I go back to Rachel. What would you say are the main hurdles or the main challenges for organizations when they want to use 70-20-10 methodology and tools around the approach? What's the main barrier that you often, or that you see that organizations face? Particularly around the L&D function of utilizing.
Yeah, probably what Rachel says in the beginning, the own mindset on, okay, we really have to bring some learning solutions, but that's actually the wrong focus. So it's like, so the main barrier is that people think that if they need to do something new in the workplace or improve something, then we should organize some formal learning activities. But that's not true. And the other thing is that we also think that we have to act very fast. So we see this in healthcare, but also in all kinds of other areas. Okay, we have an issue, we really want to solve it yesterday. But you always have time to think, even 2 or 3 days, that you always have that time. So it doesn't make sense to what we call, apply solutioneering and just pick and gather some things that you already had. It makes really sense to think a couple of days and then make an appropriate, also here, design and apply this. So I think maybe most important barrier is L&D sometimes itself.
Yes, yeah. And that reflects my experience over, I've used the 70-20-10 model for 20 years or so, and it's really difficult to change the thinking from what I call a programmatic thinking. In other words, my first response is to how can we produce a program? How can I put this into some sort of formal structure, rather than stepping back and saying, what is the core business problem we're trying to solve here? Then spending some time, as you suggest, spending some time doing the analysis and really understanding what the root cause of the challenge is and what the key factors are and what the influencing factors might be, or the barriers, and then working that way. It's really very, very difficult. Often it's quite easy to solution here, because if you've got a pack of courses or you've got an instructional design model, it's great. If you can use that and you sort of rely on that, but getting that change in mindset to think about it as solving critical business problems as opposed to learning problems. I think that's one of the key things.
Yeah, and maybe one more thing, and that's also a little bit on the L&D side. One other barrier is the misalignment with the business. So that's what Rachel just said. The markets who adapted the methodology in an early stage, they now have the connection with the business already. So also in these situations, they are getting involved. And if you don't have the connection, then they will just skip L&D. At least that's what we see also in practice, is if it comes to these kind of situations, it's not the first thing to think of. It's like you just fix it your own. You don't need L&D. And that's a sad thing. But if you have this connection with the business and you speak the language and you understand what their challenges are, it's also much easier to apply these kind of approaches.
Sure, thanks very much. Rachel, I think that leads in very nicely to a sort of wider question I'd like to ask you about the role of L&D in organizations generally, and from your experiences with 70-20-10 and Hilti, and what with the challenges that we're seeing generally with L&D facing and needing to overcome currently. But when we're through the current situation, do you think the role of L&D needs to change, and if not, why not? And if so, what sort of changes would you expect to see? I know that's a big open question, but if you can pull out a couple of thoughts around that, it'd be really informative, I'm sure.
I mean, one of the things, and one of the reasons why I speak at a lot of conferences in the last couple of years is because at Hilti, we already began that shift of changing. There's a cool book written by Shlomo Ben-Hur, The Business of Corporate Learning, I think it's called. And he talks about making transitions from order takers, and it's a nice 2x2 matrix. And we looked at that many years ago and we said, you know, we want to be in that value creator category. And what does that mean? That means we need to be linked to the decision makers. We need to understand what the drivers are. And frankly, that wouldn't matter whether we were a for-profit business or not-for-profit or anything else. What is driving what you are doing, and what are the things which are the expected outcomes for your organization of any kind? And when you look at it from that perspective, I think we still have a long journey ahead of us. We've definitely moved much closer to that value creator, to being connected into the business leaders, the decision makers, the key stakeholders, whatever it happens to be for your organization. But with that being said, we're still not as agile as we need to be. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest shifts that we have to make. And that would be with or without 70-20-10. I just think that you know, in our case, we happen to have embraced that methodology. And as I was smiling when Vivian was talking about, you know, you have time to think, and especially now, and especially moving forward, the biggest thing is going to be that frankly, I think L&D is going to have too much work. I know we're in that situation right now. We're working 18-hour days. We're absolutely, you know, just going crazy trying to meet the immediate demand worldwide for learning resources, and we need to be more agile. But that also means that those first steps in there, where you are identifying what's the business need, what does it take to accomplish that business need. In 70-20-10 methodology, what are your performance measures? Then what are the critical tasks that accomplish that? If we are going to be so limited on time as we are today, that if you are working on things that aren't going to create value, that's a very risky place to be, especially during an economic downturn. Sure. You need your learning and development teams to be creating value, not just for the financial stability of the organization, but also because, quite frankly, if they can't create value, then the business should be creating their own learning solutions. If the L&D team is not understanding what is the need for the people who are trying to perform any task in any part of your organization. And if you are disconnected from that, you can't be agile. You can't be focusing on the right priority items that will make the biggest difference. And then you're going to be developing learning solutions that don't work for the business, but even worse, you're taking the very limited L&D resources that you have and you're not focusing them on the right priorities, and then you're always going to be behind.
Yeah, we certainly see that the 70-20-10 Institute, we're seeing this, and it's interesting you talk about the agile lean, because we see that close link between this methodology and using agile lean approaches. And we see that absolutely, if you're not focusing on the business value or the organizational value you can create, and thinking about the change that you can help drive at organizational level, if you're still down thinking about the learning and thinking about the individual, it's really, really difficult to show the real value, the real business value. And as you say, that's a difficult place to be in when there's an economic downturn, and it looks like we're heading for a global economic downturn. If you're a cost center within an organization rather than a value creator, you know, it's not the best place to be, I think. Vivian, can I just ask you a final question, really around, I know you've worked with a range of organizations using 70-20-10 and the methodology. Can you talk through an example or two just quickly around where positive business cases have emerged? In other words, where there's, I mean, Rachel's given us a good example at Hilti in terms of the real business values being created, but just around where there's some tangible results have come out that you've worked with recently.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea also to come back on this. One of the cases we just had last couple of weeks, and that's an interesting thing. Also, adding to the story Rachel just talked, is said, is how do you prove your business value and also show that? We have this example in this elderly care organization where actually there is a manager involved who originally worked in the business itself, which makes a lot of sense because she knows where she talks about, but then also thinks like in the business, you know, it's like, so she says, okay, I see these kind of advantages coming up right now. And also it's a sustainable solution. It's not just for now, but also on the longer term. And then we talked about it and we discovered that really, this is a really true story, that within 2 weeks, actually we could earn between 800 and 900,000 euros for this company because of applying this methodology and choosing a different approach of onboarding these people, where we can just, change that to a situation, to a sustainable situation, where also in future we could do the same things. And exactly in this case, also with the onboarding of this jobs where we talked about right now, we could just provide the organization of spending money on people they had to hire on a short-term basis, where it's not necessary anymore. Possibly in the near future, which is great, but you also have to make that visible. And we tend to be focused on, coming up with the right solutions right now and just applying this and starting with the business in mind, but also the end we should do. And I think that I just mentioned 3 of the steps of the methodology, but there is a 4th one, and that's actually what we call in the tracker piece, where we measure if indeed the performance is increased, but also show that to all the other ones. And I think also as L&D, and of course also with all the other people who are involved in these kind of cases, we should definitely show more what we are doing and where the impact in the business is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place for us to wind this conversation up, because it in the end, it's all about the business impact. It's all about the impact of the organization. And if you can't demonstrate that, you're probably aiming at the wrong target. Phil, can I hand back to you to pick up any questions and manage the question and Q&A session?
Certainly. Thank you, Charles, Rachel, and Vivian. So we have a number of interesting questions that are coming through on the QA and on the chat room, chat board here. So one question, Laura asks, Rachel mentioned that those embracing the 70-20-10 methodology responded better to the current situation. Can you give us more info about this? What specifically were they doing? What made the most difference? Over to you, Rachel. And Charles and Vivian.
Sorry.
Of course.
So it was twofold. I think one of the things was how the L&D teams were able to respond, because they had already moved a lot of their content into an on-demand. They'd already built a lot of peer networks across the organizations. And so the L&D teams didn't have as much that they needed to do. They simply now needed to create some 70-20-10 solutions for some of the newer topics, such as working from home. From the bigger shift, I think the bigger thing that helped them was the team members had already made the mindset shift. So they had already accepted ownership of development. They had already built habits around looking for learning support materials. They had already understood how to share their knowledge. We have a social learning platform, and you know, it's been crazy to see. We're hitting between 90 and 100,000 views a day, and a lot of that is people are uploading their own. They'll learn something, whether that's something about a software tool, or it's something about how they manage their day, or it can even be something, you know, interesting. The other day, somebody shared line drawings of Hilti tools and said, hey, these make great coloring pictures for your kids. So you can color them online, you can print them out. So sometimes it's even those types of things, but it's because they've built already that sharing mindset and that that self-responsibility or that ownership, I guess is maybe a better way of saying it, to focus on these things. So they didn't feel lost. They didn't feel like, oh my God, my class has been canceled. My skills are going to stagnate, or I don't have any opportunities to develop new skills to meet the new demands. They went and felt like they were already empowered to go meet their own personal needs, whatever those happen to be.
Excellent, thank you. So we have another question, and this is an open question for all of you. It's from a colleague, Jennifer. She says, curious to see how you see the difference between L&D and organizational development. When I hear people talking about in terms of being aligned with the business, does that not sit more in the OD field?
Can I pick that up just briefly, Jennifer? I think that is a really good question. I think going forward, that line between OD and L&D will become softer and softer and slowly move away. And with the 70-20-10 approach, 70-20-10 methodology, because you're not looking only at individual development, you're looking at teams, at organizational, how the organization improves. It basically rubs that dividing line out. And I was a chief learning officer in a large global corporation, and I'm aware that, you know, there are some quite strong lines between OD, L&D, HRBPs and so on. I can see looking out that all of those will meld together, because if we're going to create value for the organization, we have to look at all of them. And I think Vivian's talked and can talk more about the fact that this methodology is around solving organizational and business problems, and part of those problems are performance problems, and part of those problems do roll down to individuals in the end, and teams. So for my sort of 50,000 foot view of the future is that OD and L&D will become melded together. I don't know whether Vivian, you and Rachel have.
Yeah, I strongly believe, and that's also what Rachel said earlier, is that just a multidisciplinary approach will work best, actually. So why would we stay in silos in those, supporting departments like Indeed, OD, L&D, but also Lean or operational excellence, or even SHE or whatever? Why wouldn't we just work together much more? Because our internal clients will be also much happier. I mean, it shouldn't be the case like, doesn't matter, okay, I call like communications or L&D or whatever with my issue and I get different answers. Why wouldn't we just try to solve those issues on a systems level and work more closely together? And of course, everybody has his own experience, which is great, but we have to connect them in a better way. It's more effective. It's also cost effective, actually, but and efficient. And in the end, your internal client is much happier than they were before, I suppose.
Excellent, thank you. So we have another question from Ellie. Many organizations, quote, think they are already using 70-20-10 methodology, but I have found that they only refer to a metaphoric interpretation of these numbers. What is the advantage of the 70-20-10 Institute approach?
If I can just pick that up, we see that as well. There's a lot of what we would call 10 plus, and Vivian and my colleague Jos has written white papers and so on. You can read about this. And 10 plus is around where you are adding social and workplace learning into formal learning. That's great. It usually improves formal solutions, but it's not really what we would call 70-20-10. And one of the basic tenets of the methodology we work with, which is around looking at the problems and identifying what the critical tasks are that need to be achieved to address those problems or to achieve what you need to achieve. And then when the design is started, we always start with a 70. And that is, you look for solutions that can be applied within the flow of work, within the workplace. And the basis of that doesn't just come out of our head. There's research that shows that the closer to the point of use that something is learnt, the more impact that learning is likely to have. So it has that sort of compounding effect there. But there certainly is, people use 70-20-10 as a metaphor. That's great, but what we're talking about here is a totally different way of working and a different methodology, rather than just a set of numbers that say, yeah, learning, we need to focus on learning through other people, through the workplace, and formally. It's going a few levels deeper than that. Excellent,
thank you. We have another question, and now these are a bit more, let's say, tactical questions. I believe this might be addressed to Rachel. So Ella asks, how are you helping people who do not have a home environment that facilitates being a remote worker? And closely related to this is what can be done from Sruti. What can be done to bring about a mindset shift in accepting that virtual training, self-directed learning is good?
I think there's a couple of things there. So what are we doing to help them? A few of things that we're doing, obviously releasing tools where they can manage some of their environment, but more importantly, releasing a lot of information to team members and team leaders both. To team leaders about setting realistic expectations, knowing that people are balancing children being at home, homeschooling, a lot of additional responsibilities that they probably didn't have before. To team members, openness, communication, we're encouraging little things. You can see that I have a fake background behind me, even though I full-time home office. So we're giving people little tips to feel more comfortable. Set a background behind you, so that you don't have to be worried about whether or not your house is clean when you're working from the living room, or that your coworkers realize you're sitting on the couch. those things will really help, that they help people's mental state by taking away some of those pressures. And I think, you know, then the minute you start taking away some of the mental stress that kind of comes with that. One of my team members said this morning, and she's always been virtual, and she's like, you guilted me into turning on my camera again. She's like, it's 6 o'clock in the morning here. I'm not ready for camera yet. and it's also that piece of saying, hey, it's okay. If you didn't fix your hair because you just jumped on a meeting at 3 a.m. Because you're working on a global project, and normally you would have traveled to that meeting. You know, hey, just say it. Just say, I'm not going to turn on my camera. It's 3 a.m. And take away the stress and the feeling that we all have to somehow be perfect at this home office remote work, because you're not. You didn't want it. You didn't plan for it. You may be living in a tiny apartment with 3 other people, and you're all working around how do you make that work. That's okay. We have to, as management teams, you have to let people know that's okay. We understand. We're in this together. I can't highlight that enough. The minute you start making it an us versus them, or, you know, you start setting standards that people can't keep, it becomes a bigger stressor, and then no one's learning. You are not learning. You are not performing if you are worrying about any of that.
Excellent. Thank you. Continuing along, just one more tactical question. Trish writes, could you be more specific about how 70-20-10 worked for onboarding?
So for us, I mean, Vivian gave an example as well, so I'll try to quickly give an example, and maybe she can do her hospital example. For us, what we did was we completely redesigned onboarding in one of our regions by taking and making a ton of content on demand, making on-the-job assignments for things that they needed to be doing with customers anyway, that they would be doing in daily work, but really taking away all the theoretical learning and making it very application-based. You just hired in. Here's 10 tasks that you need to do, and you do them with customers. You do them with your line manager. You do them with your peer. You video that. You upload that information so that you're sharing your learnings and allowing a field coach to support you. And Vivian, maybe you've got a hospital example?
Yeah, it's quite similar in terms of you onboard with the tasks that you already have to do, even maybe before you already start. You also before you already start in practice, you can use the tools you also have available in the workplace, which makes really sense. So that means that we first developed the support in the 70s, so to say, and then we also use that in the formal piece. But we were, because of that also, it was really possible to shorten the time really dramatically, because we could clean up a lot of things. And that's quite similar to what Rachel just told.
Thank you. And I'll ask one last tactical follow-up question from Susan. Does on-demand mostly mean canned segments? Trying to figure out what this looks like in practice.
For us, no. On-demand means focused on one topic, easily searchable, easily findable. Most of it is user-generated. So 70% of our on-demand content is learner-generated. It's not generated by the L&D teams. If we did, it would equate to canned segments that may or may not be relevant. But by allowing our learners to really create the on-demand learning for each other, they're sharing tips, or they're sharing a video of a demo, or they're saying, hey, this is the best way to convert a quote into an order, or in our leadership teams, hey, I found this methodology works really well when I'm coaching my team members. By doing those things, you make them very individualized. They're highly relevant. They tend to change. So they're much more agile. They're much more fitting to the changing needs of the business. And I think that's critical, is when people want something on demand. If you think about it, you go search on YouTube because you need to know how to change the background on your phone. You may get 16 hits on that, or 1600 probably for that one. And then you quickly look at it and say, how much time am I willing to invest? Okay, this one is 20 seconds. I'll take that one and see if it solves my problem. That one's 6 minutes. There's no way I'm taking that one. But that's individual. Some people may say, you know what, I'm actually really fascinated by how my phone works. I want the 6-minute one, or I love the funny stories that come with the YouTube video. Same thing has to happen in corporate learning. We have to stop thinking of ourselves as classrooms. We have to stop thinking of ourselves as professors or as the holders of the knowledge, and start accepting that, you know, the reality is the business moves really fast. We can't know everything. So we just need to know how to help the people who know it get it out there.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rachel, for that wonderful close and that summary. I'm going to share my camera so I can say goodbye to everybody. So I want to thank all of our participants, everybody who came today to join us. Thank you very much for your time to listen to Charles, Rachel, and Vivian. Once again, I remind you, if you're interested in trying a coaching ourselves, which is a small group discussion, think of it like the 20 in 70-20-10, please come to our website, coachingourselves.com, and we list all these free sessions that we're offering during this period of COVID. And I'd like to mention Charles and Vivian are co-founders of the 70-20-10 Institute. I've shared the link in the chat, and you'll receive the link in the email. Please go to their website, check out the resources, the white papers, and everything that they have on offer for all of you. And I want to thank Rachel very, very much for her time to come and chat with all of us. Any last words, Charles, Rachel, Vivian?
No, just to thank everyone, and thank everyone for attending. Thanks a lot, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I wish you all a great rest of the day, and stay safe, stay healthy, and stay at home.